Normally, I'm a little earlier in the day, but this is Bob Dineen's second address to the Renewable Fuel Summit, and no one wanted to speak after him and before lunch. So when you're staff, you kind of get the short end of the stick. So Bob, thank you for those remarks. Thank you for coming to Iowa. Thank you for you've been here twice and we haven't had a blizzard either time, so maybe we should have him come to every summit. We've had some challenges with that. But let me just give you a quick rundown. I know I'm between you and lunch, but we would like to cover a few things. So Iowa's ethanol, we look back. We always, this is kind of like the industry update. So we look back at 2013. If you think about it, if it hadn't been for the historic drought in 2012, we'd probably kind of be up here complaining a little bit about Mother Nature for 2013. I mean, think of the wet spring we all had to work through to get the crops in the ground where we could. There were parts of Iowa that didn't even happen in north central Iowa. Think of the drought that then came after that where we're dry. And yet Iowa's farmers and America's farmers still hauled in the largest corn crop in the history of the country. I mean, that's just an amazing testament to the skill and the dedication of our farmers and those that supply them with the products they need. And so, as we look back, it wasn't too bad a year as far as that goes, and we're going to fight forward for the next one. So where is Iowa's ethanol industry? Today we have 42 ethanol plants capable of producing 3.8 billion gallons. We have 3 cellulosic ethanol projects under construction and 1 in the planning stages. We take in about 1.35 billion bushels of Iowa corn, and we convert it to ethanol, to distillers grains, to industrial corn oil, and other feed products. And we need to do a better job of saying that. We shouldn't just say we've taken that corn and produce ethanol. We have to remember that we produce all of those feed co-products as well. And we represent not quite 30% of America's renewable ethanol production. So that's pretty big. And yes, it's not just ethanol, it's those big piles of distillers grains. We have to let people know that. That is a lot of protein, net new protein going into the feed supply. Iowa's also the leader in biodiesel. We have 12 biodiesel plants in Iowa with the capacity to produce about 315 million gallons of biodiesel. Now last year, hey, I didn't update my slide. That's what I get. 10 operated in 2012. 10 also operated in 2013. And in 2013, the slide should say, they produced 230 million gallons of biodiesel. That is a record for Iowa, and it makes up nearly 14% of the nation's biodiesel production. So we are number 1 in ethanol. We are number 1 in biodiesel. And it's also interesting to note, if you look at the feedstocks that go in, soybean oil is still the number 1 feedstock for Iowa biodiesel plants. But we saw when we went from 2012 to 2013 and that growth, a big chunk of that growth came from low carbon feedstocks, things like animal fats, industrial corn oil, and used cooking oil. So when the EPA is looking at this and they're saying, hey, where's this marginal growth coming from? It's from those low carbon feedstocks. And if they try to squish the biodiesel industry back down, which would be horrible for many different reasons, it would also be bad for getting these low carbon feedstocks into the food chain. So with all these plants, all this stuff going on, what's it mean? It means that we purchase about $11.5 billion worth of goods and services, the vast majority of it within the state of Iowa. As that trickles throughout the economy, we add $5.5 billion to Iowa's economy, to Iowa's GDP, and over $4 billion to Iowa's household income, primarily rural income and farm income. And we directly and indirectly support over 62,000 jobs in Iowa. That is an amazing chunk of our economy, and it's a chunk that's worth fighting to keep. And so, as we look back on 2013, production and profits were sound. But we took a beating, a pounding politically in 2013. But I'm here today to stand before you and to say that the Iowa renewable fuels industry can take their punches, and we are fighting back. Thank you. I owe Scott Hedrick a drink for that. One man can make a difference. All right, so we are fighting back. No one thought it was going to be easy. We've heard Bob talk about, we've heard others. We're trying to take market share from the world's most powerful and profitable industry. It's not supposed to be easy. And quite frankly, the world needs oil. At least in the short term, the world needs oil. But consumers also deserve the choice at the pump to choose higher ethanol blends and higher biodiesel blends if they want to. They should not be locked out. So, what are some of these punches we've taken? I mentioned Mother Nature. Last year we had the wet spring and the dry summer and fall, and yet we still had the highest corn crop on record. You know, the USDA is now projecting nearly 2 billion bushels of corn sitting in storage at the end of this marketing year. There is no competition between food and fuel. There's 2 billion bushels sitting there that nobody wants. There is a corn surplus. We're not taking a kernel of corn away from any market anywhere in the world that wants it. If someone thinks so, I can give them the name of a lot of farmers in this room that would be happy to sell the corn to them that's otherwise going to sit unused at the end of this marketing year. We need to just pound that into people's heads. That's number 2. Okay, number 3. Oh, does anyone remember that Associated Press story from a few months ago where they went down to Wayne County, Iowa and said, oh, the RFS is causing high corn prices and we're tilling under all of this virgin prairie. Do you remember that one? We're ruining the environment. Do you ever get the feeling that some reporters and policymakers from the East Coast and West Coast really don't know which end of the cow the corn goes in? Do you just sometimes wonder? I do. It was the drought, stupid, as they say in D.C. Do you realize that corn was $4.34 the day President Bush signed RFS 2 into law in 2007, and the closing price of corn the day that AP story went out on the wire was $4.34? Kind of convenient. I wish I could have told you I controlled that. I didn't. It just happened to work out that way. It was the drought that drove up corn prices, not the RFS. The American farmer can produce enough corn for food and fuel and to have a surplus to put them into bankruptcy. You've proven it time and time again, and no one can beat you at it anywhere in the world. And then, you know, let's just look at the facts. Wayne County farmers planted 88,000 acres of corn in 1985. There was no RFS in 1985. There's a relatively small ethanol industry compared to today. Well, they only planted less than 60,000 acres in 2012, the last year we had the county by county numbers, and it wouldn't have been much higher than that in 2013. It has nothing to do with the RFS. We went down, we talked to those farmers. The AP reporters had misled them about what that story was about. You know what they told us? It doesn't matter whether corn is $1.80 or $7.80. A good farmer who has skin in the game, who has a family they care about, is going to take care of that land. They're going to take care of that land year after year and be the best steward of that land they want. Now, are there a small percentage of farmers who just have I've got to maximize profits this year no matter what mentality? Sure there are. We're human beings. There is a tiny, tiny fraction of a percentage that act that way. And you know what? They act that way, they farm that way, whether corn is $1.80 or $7.80. The price of corn doesn't change who that farmer is and how they approach their land and their family's legacy. And I'll tell you another thing, that those good farmers, there was one difference. So the price of corn doesn't change that attitude. But let me tell you what the price of corn does change. It changes that farmer's ability to practice quality land stewardship. With the higher price of corn and with the rural income that we've seen over the last 8 years, we have seen unprecedented millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars going into conservation practices. They have all these wonderful cost share programs for wetlands, for buffer strips, for all this stuff. Well, they're cost share programs. If you got $1.80 corn and you're not making any money, you have no money to put into a cost share program. We've seen more acres go into wetlands and buffer strips and all the tilling and all these things, buying the equipment to do the new conservation tilling and things like that we've ever seen before. Higher corn prices have led to the best land stewardship practices in the history of this country. I'm a farm boy from southern Iowa. I get a little worked up about that. I'm sorry. And I won't bore you with these statistics, but what this shows is that if you look at renewable fuels, whether from 1980 to present when we've had ethanol, or more specifically from the divide between 2000 and 2001, Iowa's first dry mill ethanol plant opened in 2001. Siouxland Energy in Quad County was right behind. So if you look at whether it's the overall ethanol era or the modern ethanol era, what you see is acres to principal crops are down, not up. We're not plowing under virgin prairie. I'm told we do have some little small, for historical purposes, reserves of virgin prairie in Iowa. I've never actually seen one. CRP acres are actually higher in 2012 than they were before the modern ethanol era began in Iowa. We have more acres in CRP, less acres in corn than we did before. So it's not, the facts are there and we need to do those. So what's the fourth punch? The blend wall, the so-called blend wall. You know, how many times have we heard our friends at the oil industry say, consumers don't want these blends and retailers don't want to sell them? Well, the fact of the matter is when consumers are given a choice, they choose them. We've got 14 registered E85 or E15 locations, 72 blender pumps, 186 E85 pumps, and more on the way. In fact, a large retailer, Murphy USA, recently announced they're bringing the E15 and E85 to their stations in Iowa. But we've also got little guys like retailer Charlie Good from Good and Quick in Nevada, Iowa. If you're ever going through, in fact, go out of your way to go to Nevada, Iowa, and go to this store and meet Charlie. I don't know if Charlie's here today, but he's awesome. And he had a branded station with the big oil name, I won't mention which one, and they wanted to tie his hands up and prevent him from offering these fuels that he knew his customers wanted. So you know what he told that brand to do? Take a hike. He unbranded, he marks his own fuel now, and he says, I'm a little independent guy, and I've got two of the biggest convenience store companies in the United States nearby, and I'm kicking their butt. And I'm doing it because I'm offering things that they don't offer. And he offers ethanol blends like E15, and he offers biodiesel. And what we're seeing is more and more retailers are realizing if we actually put these things out and price them right, it's pretty good way to attract new customers in. So there's no blend wall. There's just the bogus blend wall that the big oil is trying to build with their restrictions on the selling of these fuels. All right, what's punch number 5? This was amazing. The whole crux of how the White House decided to lower the RFS was it was going to raise gas prices. Why was it going to raise gas prices? The oil industry paid for this big fancy study that said, if you make us use more ethanol, we will, through a convoluted logic that's not accurate, we will have to sell less gasoline in the United States. And that shorter supply of gasoline will raise gas prices. So you have to stop this. In other words, if you make us sell more renewable fuels, we'll stop refining as much gasoline. We'll stop doing what we make money doing. We will economically harm ourselves. We will cut off our nose to spite our face. And the White House OMB bought it hook, line, and sinker. That has to be the most successful bluff in the entire United States since the sheriff took himself hostage in Blazing Saddles. For those of you that are old enough to remember that movie, it was the most amazing bluff ever, and they bought it. Of course, the fact of the matter is oil companies don't have a real good track record on these things. They were wrong about lead. They were wrong about MTBE. They were wrong about ethanol's ability to replace those products in California, New York, and nationwide, and they're wrong about E15. So they've got a long track record. It's just being wrong. And in fact, Iowa State's own Bruce Babcock, an economist, looked at that study they did and said, no, the market forces will have them refine and supply the market because that's how they make the money. They're not going to just decide to short the market. He said the only way that strategy would work is, well, he said that strategy is not feasible unless obligated parties, that's the oil companies, formed an illegal cartel to reduce sales to boost prices. So unless they're planning to break the law, it just doesn't work, folks. All right, punch number 6. I know I'm between you and lunch. Just that the EPA said we should lower this thing. And the most offensive part of that proposal to me as a farm kid is that the White House OMB actually said, if you set the number too low, no harm, no foul. No harm, no foul. Well, you know, you can't increase it. Do we skip some? All right, maybe I got these out of order. So no harm, no foul. You know, in doing that and saying if you don't have the infrastructure in place, we aren't going to raise the RFS, as Bob Dineen said, turns it on its head. It's like putting the fox in charge of the hen house. It absolutely rewrites law. And the last time I checked, regulators are not supposed to rewrite laws. They're supposed to implement laws. So no harm, no foul. Well, there is harm. This is what we woke up to last Thursday on the morning of the hearing, the RFS hearing that Governor Branstad sponsored. And I don't know if you can see it out there, but the subheader is the best one. Well, it's not good, it's the most poignant. The possible cut to the renewable fuel standard leaves many Iowa companies sitting still or reducing production while politicians fight over their mandates. So I ask you, if you're one of these plants, you know, industry experts say that maybe if this proposal goes through, maybe 25 to 45% of biodiesel production across the United States will shut down. That's thousands of jobs. That's thousands of families that are impacted. If you're one of those families that's out there wondering, will I still have my job a few months from now? Do you think there's no harm and no foul in this proposal? I doubt it. And they did it based on outdated data, which we're close to lunch, so I'm not going to do it. They intentionally took, we had provided them, the biodiesel industry had provided them updated data on biodiesel production and feedstock availability and all this stuff, and they intentionally didn't use it. They used outdated data from 2011 to make the projections into 2014. They did it willingly. They used wrong data because they needed to come up with a wrong answer, and they need to be held accountable for that. The biodiesel industry has produced 1.7, maybe even 1.8 billion gallons this year. They can do it again. They've proven they can do it. The notion they can't is ridiculous. Why in the world would we want to turn our back on America's advanced biofuel that's commercially available today? You know, that's where we're trying to get to. That's what we need to do too. Why this administration do that, I do not know. There is harm. We're going to hear later this afternoon from cellulosic ethanol plants. You know, the plants that are under construction now, their financing is probably in good shape, and they're building the plant, right? But will we ever see number 2? Whether it's the Poet plant, the Quad County plant, Fiberite, Poet DSM, will we ever see number 2? It's awfully hard to think that number 2 of this technology will be built in this country if this proposal goes through. And there is harm. We've talked about it. From the moment this proposal was leaked in the media, the price of corn went down. And it's down now to the farmers I've talked to, at or below the cost of production. And so what are we looking at for 2014? We're looking at corn prices being down. We're looking at farm income taking a hit. We're looking at no traditional safety net programs in the Farm Bill, and land values going down. That could all happen. That is the recipe for another farm crisis. We heard the governor this morning talk about how he'd been governor during one farm crisis and he doesn't want to go back. That's what's at stake in rural America. That's what's going to cause the huge economic harm. Not even what might happen to this ethanol plant or that ethanol plant. As horrible as that might be to those investors and those employees, this is what's going to really be at stake. And this is just a chart that shows, if you see the red down at the bottom, for 25 years we had the price of corn below the cost of production. Then we enact the RFS, and from 2006 through 2013, the price of corn was above the price of production. Farmers could farm for a market, not a government program, and I'm very scared that if this proposal stands, we're going to go back to what we had before. And the other thing is, farmers are going to grow more corn. How do I know that? Well, you've always grown more corn. All right, RFS, no RFS, ethanol, no ethanol, foreign demand, no foreign demand. Over time, yes, Mother Nature and stuff changes it year to year, but over time we grow more corn. What in the world is going to soak up we already have a surplus. What in the world is going to be that giant SpongeBob, I should have thought of that, giant sponge, and suck up the corn surplus? If it's not higher ethanol blends, yes, we'll get some more livestock numbers back up. Yes, we have some export opportunities. But over the next 10 to 20 years, we're talking with the technology that's in the pipeline from the Syngentas and the DuPonts and everybody else, we're talking about an awful lot of corn. We need something to suck it up. We need E15 as a starting point. That won't even be the ending point. And the RFS and E15 are intertwined, and other people have talked to you about that, so I'm not. So what if we don't? What if we don't? We are left with the federal petroleum mandate. Federal law requires you to use a certain amount of petroleum in every gallon of gasoline you buy. That is a matter of federal law. They say we have a mandate. They've got an 85% petroleum mandate. That blows ours out of the water. The RFS was always about market access, getting other options other than 85% petroleum, 85 to 90% petroleum in front of consumers. And that is what it's about. That's why it has widespread support across the political spectrum from the Midwest. People who've taken the time to actually think through this and understand it, understand it's the one tool we have to get these choices in front of consumers so the consumer can make the choice. Look, if you're out there, maybe there's someone here that came to hear the other side of the story and you don't like ethanol. That's okay. You're welcome here. Just keep your head down. If you want to leave here today and go buy E0 and pay 23 cents a gallon more for it, fine. I don't care. I think you're silly, but I don't have a problem with that. But I want the choice at that same gas station to buy E15 for 10 cents a gallon less than E10. That's what we want. That's what the RFS is about. And so we are going to, thank you. All right, I'm not holding you back too long. So the other thing I will say, normally I speak right before the governor in the morning, but as I said, I had to take the post-Deneen slot. Nobody else would dare enter. Is if the federal government is going to pull the rug out from underneath us, then that means state policy is even more important. So we are going to be talking with our state legislators and the governor and Secretary Northey about things that they can do to help biodiesel industry, to help get higher ethanol blends out there, because we've got too much momentum going right now. We can't let that stop. And so we've got to do it. So, in closing, I would just say that this was a political decision at the White House. They decided there was no harm, no foul to lower the RFS. I think with your comments today and with everything that's gone on before this, that the White House, D.C. is pretty dysfunctional. It's pretty out of touch. But even they are still pretty good at counting votes. So that's why the number of these comments is so important, and that's why we've been hounding everyone to do it so much. Because we need someone in the White House that thought there was no harm, no foul, to wake up tomorrow morning and say, you know what, we kind of stepped in it here. We kind of stepped in it here. There is harm, there is foul, there is a political problem, and we need to fix it. And then all President Obama has to do, this is real simple, and it is just this simple. Senator Grassley said this. All President Obama has to do is decide that he's going to stick with the RFS that he campaigned on, that he came to Iowa and promised people not only to support, but to double in size, not gut it, to double it. That's what he came here and campaigned on. And got pretty good support here and basically launched his effort. And all he has to do is say, you know what, I made a promise, I'm going to stick with it, the facts are there, the data is there, it's the right thing to do, it actually lowers gas prices, doesn't raise them, it creates consumer choice, it doesn't hurt it, it reduces our dependence on foreign oil instead of increasing it, it lowers our carbon footprint, and it reduces toxic emissions into the air. Gee, I think I like this. He picks up his phone, and he recently said he had a phone. So he picks up his phone, he calls the administrator of the EPA, and he says, uphold the law. Do not rewrite the law, implement the law, and this is done. And that's what we're calling on President Obama to do today. Thank you for your time, and I think we have some, I don't have time for questions because you're all hungry. I'll hang around here if you have questions, but we do have some very, very important announcements. So Lucy, if you want to come on up.